E3. One letter and one number that, when combined, ignite images of glitz, glamour, and gargantuan budgets. It's a time of celebration and cynicism, cheering and cringing, charity and concern, with the negatives often attached to demos, or more specifically, their seemingly frequent nature to present graphics, mechanics, or in extreme cases, a game's core design, not apparent in the final product. Often with the contrast being so blatant, comparisons themselves generate a strong reaction. Admittedly, E3 has become a show that inspires a little more than a few tweets from me, which is why I tend to be the elephant in Discord whether the majority of voices express frustration or excitement. But it's from those interactions recently that had me wondering, what are the demos that hold up? What showcases were of the studio's upcoming game rather than a vertical slice? It's reasonable to assume the most acclaimed games would have the best demos. When the studios got their hands on critical and commercial gold, why wouldn't they show it off? Our first scenario is quite similar to the most infamous demos, with a studio aiming for designs they've yet to find out aren't possible within their technical restraints, which is what happened to BioShock Infinite. The game has two demos that, while establishing Infinite's iconic art design, are missed by many as they far eclipse the final release in terms of scale and detail. NPCs would react to the player's actions, entire battles would be initiated without cutscenes, and enemies could dynamically call reinforcements, including fully stocked zeppelins. These concepts fueled our imaginations not only for their spectacle, but also due to them being iterative of things we had done. Traveling through hell and hellfire to invade a monstrous ship, destroying its power from the inside, is what millions did in Halo 3. But at the end of the day, this game had to release for systems which couldn't handle Quake 4, and all the graphical tweaks in the world could never make up for the amount of AI, assets, and scripts functioning at once, on a map that could probably host a battle royale. Really, the only thing that separated this game from the Colonial Marines of the world was Infinite itself being well received, so the conversation at launch was about the story, design, and gameplay released rather than proposed. And those with longer memories know this has happened quite a few times.
This is a real-time feed. No smoke and mirrors pre-recorded bullshit.
Yeah, this didn't age well. Granted, it's not pre-recorded, but definitely smoke and mirrors. Halo 2 is one of my all-time favorite games, so if there's anything that proves how little a demo can represent a game's quality, this is it. Bungie's unveiling at E3 2003 was one of the show's highlights, with legions of fans ecstatic over the game's additions such as dual-wielding, vehicle boarding, and expanded sandboxes that, similar to Infinite's demos, promised levels that were bigger and better, with NPCs acting separately from the player's involvement and multiple battlefields. When floored by such a remarkable stage, I'm sure anyone would be dying to see what the rest of the game was like.
Add this version on the... Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. This is rough. This may not be really worth doing much here, guys.
In reality, this level was effectively the only playable stage Bungie had internally, with their ambitions not being possible on the soon-to-be-replaced Xbox. Turned out that Halo 1 was already pushing the system, and Halo 2's enhanced visuals would end up coming at the cost of smaller levels, and the rapid development required to complete the project made these levels more linear. The game's success is a testament to Bungie's commitment, but that doesn't diminish the fact that a game with only one barely functional level in nearly 2 years of development was being used to market to millions. No consumers bought this game. They purchased something which resembled the E3 build, taking its essentials and squeezed them into a finished product. The cutting room floor exists for a reason. It's a necessary part of creation that often improves what's being assembled, but in this case, the floor itself was rebuilt. And as we've already arrived at demos which aren't even on the same engine as the final game, it's time to tour through progressively accurate demos. And considering our first example, there's a reason I say progressively. Just bear with me. The original Watch Dogs was made to represent gaming's next generation, and in that it succeeded. It was the game which confirmed for players the 8th generation was really the 7th with Botox, and the injections were quickly wearing off. Dazzling audience members in E3 2012 with top-notch graphics would lead to Comet Wars a year later, when the game had notably less detail. With that said, let's erase graphics from the equation and strictly observe the gameplay. What is done in these early showcases? Our protagonist hacks ATMs, highlights potential victims, chases a criminal, hacks CTOS, enters bullet time, climbs buildings, is intruded by another player, and all of this is in the final release. With exception to the initial reveal's character swap, nothing has been lost in gameplay. Even the heads-up display only received minor alterations. By all means, Watch Dogs' advertising, at least in terms of gameplay, is accurate to what was sold, especially when compared to Ubisoft games before and after it. It earned the moniker of overhyped in part due to the downgrade from the first true next-gen experience, but I believe the backlash to Watch Dogs is because its implications ended up just being the content. Stopping criminals seemed interesting until players realized it's the same generated event each time. Hacking parts of the city was compelling, except all hackables were exhausted before T-Bone's appearance. Without the demo's cutting-edge visuals, the aspects of Watch Dogs' iterative of not just other games but Ubisoft's own library overstayed their welcome. When id Software opened Bethesda's initial E3 conference in 2005, it was with a confidence unexpected from the mixed response to Rage. And being somebody who's exhausted the game's campaign, soundtrack, and even multiplayer, it's easy to understand why. Seemingly everybody is ecstatic for Doom Eternal due to 2016's phenomenal art, design, and technology, almost all of which appeared in the game's E3 demo. The more muted colors, slightly changed imp designs, and fully electronic score don't mask the glory kills, weapons, and enemies all being present in the final product. Even the factory itself has an identical layout. Someone who pre-ordered based off of this demo wouldn't feel ripped off. In fact, they'd all the more likely notice the subtle improvements made between this build and the game's launch. But this demo didn't earn a pre-order from me. In fact, it made me utterly doubt a game I'd go on to love. And it's something that should be noticeable merely from seeing the gameplay. The E3 demo isn't Polygon territory, but it's worryingly close. My criticisms of this demo at the time were its appalling speed, clunky controls, and minimal action with no more than 4 enemies on screen, directly contrasting what Doom does extremely well. The action is relentless, controls are buttery smooth, and the speed falls just short of an arena shooter, but none of that is on display. The impression myself and many got online was this shaped up to be an obnoxiously streamlined blend of the old games with Doom 3, as the pacing of these encounters fall in line with that game, which was more focused on being atmospheric horror rather than a metal album brought to life. I don't know who decided to present a high-octane, fast-paced shooter with my mother holding the controller, but I suspect it was what also decided this artwork should be replaced. The market was hardly saturated with games like Doom. Wolfenstein might have been Bethesda's closest analog, but even those games aren't nearly as old school with iron sights, scripted set pieces, and cutscenes. That isn't a knock against those games. Shameless plug. They're merely elements which wouldn't be seen as risky. Doom, meanwhile, featured key cards, armor pickups, hordes of enemy types, and movement that's only slow compared to its originator. I suspect that id Software and Bethesda feared a demo that's more NVIDIA than Polygon would have made many skeptical about its accessibility and viability on consoles, being that the 7th generation dropped Quake and Unreal Tournament almost immediately in favor of stop-and-pop shooters, and Titanfall and Advanced Warfare's initial success didn't translate into long-term growth. The fear was justified, but ultimately, the game earned its reputation in spite of the demo, rather than because of it. But at this same conference was a game which wouldn't be misrepresented in its graphics or gameplay. And it's the one Bethesda's show was made for, because, let's be honest, their E3 debut could have easily been dubbed the Fallout 4 conference. The franchise might be recovering from a severe wound currently, but at the time, Bethesda were riding high off of Skyrim selling like Pokemon, and 5 years with only a Kotaku article to support Fallout 4's existence meant the conference was an absolute rush for fans. Years of silence culminated into 30 minutes of reveals, artwork, openings, conversation, crafting, building, tie-ins, collector's editions, and action presented by the Todd himself, Mr. Howard. It was masterful, teasing people with concept images hinting at familiar but uncharted grounds, an introduction unlike anything previously done in the franchise, unexpected additions like ordering dogs or a unique power armor HUD. It made people excited for a mobile tie-in, for crying out loud. I even think id Software took notes, as Doom Eternal's reveal at QuakeCon follows a similar structure, showcasing concepts leading into extended gameplay that's accurate to the average player's experience, with a unique level introduction Doom hasn't done before. And the best part is, despite the memes born from
all of this just works,
the Fallout 4 scene in this demo is the game you play. I only just got around to Fallout 4 for the purposes of researching this video and found everything Bethesda showed all those years ago is still present, with enough content kept out of the conference to remain engaging. Skipping Fallout 4 is why I didn't pay much attention to 76 and the soap opera it spawned, but upon looking back at this presentation, it's understandable why people got excited for 76, because Fallout 4's conference wasn't smoke and mirrors. It was a confident showcase of a passionately developed game. It was one of the most accurate demos. Yet, there's a massive discrepancy between people's response to that demo and the finished game. The excitement from E3, if present at launch, was overshadowed by conflicted opinions, analysis, and reviews, which is why I put accurate in quotes. Because even a long-form demo is just a fraction of what the player's experience will be, and as a result, lead to them, irrespective of authenticity to the finished product, leave them with very different impressions. For Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, the show floor demo was of New Orleans, an open-ended and combat-heavy level giving players the impression that this is what the rest of the game would be like, and it is, for that particular section. Whereas the rest of the game, for better or worse depending on who you talk to, is heavily focused on cutscenes and dedicated story segments. One could say the demo was inaccurate, but that's awkward when the level is exactly what's seen in the final product. I strongly agree that CG trailers are worthless in defining what a game is for potential customers, and believe it's better to hold off on showing early builds which are merely goalposts for where a developer hopes to be rather than where they actually are. I'll take that Fallout 4 conference over 76 every time, but that doesn't mean a game should receive credit just for not blatantly lying to its user base, especially when, as previously demonstrated, an accurate demo can still misinform. Not to mention whether or not a demo is representative can only be judged after the game's release. Until then, all we can do is hope. And that's okay. It's fine to reserve cautious optimism for what interests you. There's hundreds of games competing for the limited spare time we have, so many that it's not worth putting pressure on presentations, trailers, or demos which may or may not be representative of the game, and even when they are, that may not be the case next time. And for select online retailers, the 2 hours playable before your refund's revoked is basically the modern form of a demo. Only unlike a presentation lacking context with professional oversight and audiences that'll politely applaud everything, you are without influence left to judge the experience, not from watching, but playing. As if to hammer the video's point home, it's been recently revealed that the E3 demo for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order that underwhelmed viewers withheld vital information regarding the game's structure of a Metroidvania with multiple planets to explore. If this is true, meaning potentially millions of viewers have already been misled, and it's up to the game's future marketing and launch to overcome this. Presumably the demo was limited to 15 minutes to make time for Apex and Battlefield updates, meaning Respawn had to reveal the game's true nature in a blog. Updates to old games get stage shows, proper demos get blog posts. We really are hopeless sometimes. Why do your videos reject the lo-fi aesthetics of DIY basement scenes? Plinkett owns the copyright, and I don't want a pizza roll. Do you think it's even remotely possible to make a turret segment interesting? Half-Life did a decent job of it, and Modern Warfare 3s are so ridiculous I find them adorably entertaining. Honestly, I don't have a problem with them specifically. The next step, however, is to give the player a reason to set up their own turret sequences for variety. Give the player a reason to be stationary, like being a machine gunner in Red Orchestra, but only temporary and in single player. When editing videos, do you tend to have anything on in particular in the background to help you focus on what you're doing? If so, what is that thing? Pretty much nothing, with exception to occasionally putting on ambient soundtracks. My go-tos are always the Vietnam War, Before the Flood, and Mankind Divided soundtracks. Highly recommended. Have you watched Dread, and how awesome is Dread? I've watched it, and it's awesome. Prefer it to John Wick.
Yeah, I said it.
Why are MMOs so boring? Because to be an MMO, you must have quantity, which often comes at the cost of quality. Thoughts on Halo's E3 trailer? It's what I expected. It's cool of them to have been teasing the rings since the reveal though, and possibly even earlier. Do you hate boomer babies? No, because they go boom when I throw them. How do you unwind when the place you work is the same place you play? With difficulty.